Good day, good evening, good afternoon, good night, wherever it is that you are at this time of today. We are to go live today with my dear friend Robin Graham, who's going to join us in a little bit. And we're going to be talking about something very, very interesting, which we think we are. Is going to join us in just a few seconds. She already requested to join me. So just a little bit of patience and we'll be right there with her. There she is. Hello, beautiful.
Hello, hello, hello. Hi.
So happy to be
Excited,
able. Yeah,
excited.
very cool. Yeah, this is the second one that we are doing monthly for our audience on the PSYCH-K Instagram account. And we'll be doing one of these every month because we would love to be able to chat about different topics that we have found interesting in our own journey. So I would love to introduce first my dear friend Robin. She's my most admired person in the PSYCH-K world. She's been my mentor and she's such a beautiful human being. So that's all I'm going to say on my side. And I would let her introduce herself as so that everybody knows why we're going to be talking about this with you today.
Thank you, Marta, and you are one of my faves too. I appreciate it. So welcome. I'm just going to admit this is my first live, so
Yes.
yay, me. And thank you to PSYCH-K. Did some balances for that, nerves. So yeah, I have been involved with PSYCH-K since 1994. And what occurred for me is that I heard Rob Williams, our beautiful originator, speaking at a corporate conference. Well, actually, I wasn't at the conference, I listened to the recording. And as he spoke, the 1 hour that I listened to, it was like every cell in my body went ding, 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 ding. I've got to go learn this. And in reflecting back, it's probably the first time in my life I actually took action and felt that. So I took the workshops and questioned everything. I was the biggest doubter in the room. And then I got home and my life started to change. And I could not justify it in any way other than this workshop that I had taken. Continued to work with PSYCH-K myself and went back to workshops, became one of the first instructors in the world of PSYCH-K. And so that was in 97. And I have been blessed to be teaching and doing private sessions and sharing PSYCH-K since then. I've been all over the world, done PSYCH-K actually on 7 continents. I was in Antarctica
Wow.
earlier this year and did some balances with myself, not teaching, but balances with myself. So officially, we can say we've been on 7 continents.
Yeah.
And just thrilled to be able to share more about PSYCH-K. You know, one of the things that people always say when they come into the workshops is, why doesn't everybody know about this?
Mhm.
So we're excited to share about PSYCH-K, but more about the application and
Right.
areas that you might think about. And so tonight we're talking about burnout.
Mhm.
And I come from the corporate background and worked in corporate for many years, and then I've been an entrepreneur since 1990. So I've got the understanding of experience of quote burnout in corporate and burnout as an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
So I'm
Mhm.
excited to explore that with you tonight, Marta.
Yeah, that's very interesting because as our you're not only probably the longest the person who has been doing psyche the longest that I know of after Rob,
Mm,
and you have this beautiful combination of that long-term experience of using this with yourself, of teaching to so many people throughout these years and seeing the effect of this, of reprogramming our subconscious mind in different aspects of life, and particularly like you were saying, in how does this apply when we are, whether we are part of an organization, whether we are entrepreneurs, whether we are solopreneurs, whatever it is that we are doing in the business world, because we are all somehow in a business. And I'm very happy that we can share this because this is one of those topics that people talk about, but they don't find that there's many solutions
mm,
for it. So
mm.
that's what we would love to share with you guys today. I too come from 24 years of marketing research as director of a company in Colombia for my family, which was very intense. And
Burnout
just
from many angles.
yeah, because at the time, and this is part of what we're going to talk today, um, my my definition of who I was is I was the director of that company. That's how I defined myself. And after that, I would be a mom, and after that, I would be a partner, and after that, after, then I am me. But I was completely out of the picture. And doing Psych for the past 15 years has been such a blessing. And I hear these people say all the time, because like you, I've had the privilege of teaching in so many countries and in different languages, in different cultures. And still, what we get back from those who are joining us today, who are already facilitators, and those who are not, this is what we are inviting you to discover is life is just so much easier with Psych when you have this practical tool to reprogram, not to go back and understand why we're living what we're living, but how do I move forward?
Right.
And that's what we want to share today.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. One of the, sometimes people ask, well, what has Psych-K done for you? What's
Mhm.
the big gift for you? I mean, I could go on for days along that,
Yeah.
but I would say that the simplest answer is it has given me the ability to take care of myself, to really do we can talk about self-care, but this allows you to really shift what's the instigator of stressors in our life,
Mhm.
what initiates us to be triggered by something. Like you said, we don't have to understand the why, we can shift it.
Right.
And that power, when you go to the workshops, is literally in your fingertips to do that.
Mhm.
It's
Mhm.
literally available to you from that point on in the workshops. And to me, that is just thrilling, not to have to depend on anybody else, and I can do it all by myself. Yes, it's great to work with other people, and it's amazing in a 3-day workshop you can learn how to do this by yourself.
Yeah. And before we go into our conversation, further into our conversation, I would like to ask those watching who already do Psych, those who are already integrating this in your daily lives, share with us what's one thing that you think has been very evident in how you see the magic in your life, so that we don't feel like it's just us talking. There's more people
Right.
out there who are
We're always used to
who,
having more
right.
people around us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then later, once we start talking about this, if this relates with you, also tell us, yes, I can see myself in this situation. So today's topic, Robin, burnout. What feeds burnout? What, in your experience, on your own personal experience, and what you've seen later on when you do private sessions with Psych and in workshops, what feeds burnout?
Yeah, it's interesting. There's probably a litany of things that feed burnout, but I think when we boil it down, it's committing too much, too fast, too many things, and probably behind that would be why. And
Mhm.
I think part of the reason why we commit is we want to either feel like we belong, so we don't want to disappoint anybody, expectations, or we're trying to control, you know.
Mhm.
I think it comes down to control or belong, right?
Yeah,
Is a simple answer.
yeah. When when I was in that world, I call that my life before Psyche. Um, I just had so much to do all the time. It was there was the overachiever in me that needed to say yes to everything, every project that came in, plus everything that was going on in my personal life, and there was no balance there. And I was talking with my daughter earlier today, and what's behind all that? Why did I need
Hmm.
the overachievement? Why did I need the let's do a lot so people see me doing a lot too? And it was an absolute lack of self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, I didn't get the program, or I learned that to be worthy of whatever it was, I had to demonstrate that. I had to earn it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So I came into the culture of let's do a lot to achieve a lot.
Right, exactly. And our value or our worth is related to what we do,
Hmm.
you know. And so even in the organizations, a lot of times we do these reviews at the end of a year, and it's based on check
Right.
marks. What did you get
Hmm.
done? Not on who were you? You know,
Hmm.
how
Hmm.
were you a supportive team member, or were you the one that nobody wanted to work with, but you got everything done, you know?
Hmm.
So I think there's a challenge also in knowing, in doing versus being, you know,
Uh-huh.
you know,
Exactly.
are we only saying yes because we need to be doing something so that our value is there, or do we know we have value, we have intrinsic value,
Mhm.
and we can say no to something and it's not going to kick us off the island. It's not going to
Yeah.
stop us from being accepted. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's also been evolution in that since the pandemic, since
Mhm.
2020, when before then there was a high value in how many hours you were sitting at your desk. And there was this pride in organizations, or these kind of requirement,
It was
to
the culture. There was a
uh
culture.
a
Yeah.
culture. And then we moved to doing work from home. And I wonder how that shifted the burnout at the organization to the burnout at home,
Right.
when you were not only working, but also taking care of everything that was going on mentally, emotional, physically, kids, and all that environmental thing.
Yeah.
And now we have again another shift when organizations are saying, well, no more from home, you need to come back
Back.
and
Yeah.
adapt to
Yeah.
that.
Right.
How is that
Yeah.
feeding the burnout now?
Oh, I think it's escalated
Hmm.
higher than ever now, you know, because you could, prior to the pandemic, you were at work, you could deal with whatever, your kids were being taken care of, whatever is your scenario was. Then you came home and you had to take care of them getting online, you being online, you know, the dog barking in the background. I mean, everything started to close in on people, and they didn't have any. I think one of the transitions that were beneficial was driving from the office back home, and you had some quiet space in there to
Hmm.
transition into your back home. You lost that. You
Hmm.
know, we lost that. And I agree. Now people are transitioning back, and they don't want to go back. So there's a stress level of that, and companies, you know, not all, a lot of them are figuring this out, but a lot of them still back to that old culture of, if I can't see you at your desk, I don't know that you're working.
Right.
And even during the pandemic, they had, you know, software capacities to tell
Hmm.
if you were typing or if you were on your computer. So yeah, I think there's an escalation of burnout, and it's impacting, you know, we talk about burnout in work, but we also have burnout at home,
Right.
in relationships at home, and, you know, kids and everything going on. Um, and even if you're not married, you've got burnout of, you know, the dating scene can create
No.
burnout. You would know, I
Yeah,
wouldn't.
yeah, I
Yeah.
would know. Been there, done that. Bought the t-shirt. Not going
Right.
back for.
Not doing it again. Yeah, but I think it, you know, it all boils down to energy,
Mhm.
and where are we going to place our energy? Where can we gain energy, feed our life energy, and where is it draining out of us?
Mhm.
And, you know, if we're getting drained both at work and at home, then that feeds that burnout concept also.
Yeah. And again, to those watching today, if this resonates with you, if you feel like you've gone through this, and maybe you do PSYCH-K and you found a solution for it within yourself, share it with us. Or if you're not familiar with PSYCH-K yet, and this is sounding like something, wow, this is what I'm going through, share it with us. We would love to at least read your comments and see that we are not there just talking on our own. Um, so I've been having conversations in the past year with somebody who works at human resources in Amazon, and he was sharing with me how worried the organizations are, and how the World Health Organization, the WHO, has become put anxiety in the top of the list of one of the most delicate mental health problems, and it's directly linked to burnout,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
particularly because they don't find that the traditional way of dealing with it is actually helping people. you know Everything's valid, and we've gone through all possible ways of dealing with our things until we found Psych-K. So we're not discounting anything. everything
Mhm.
everything is valid for whoever needs to do therapy or meditation or whatever. But they find that it's just not working out. People keep going back to the burnout. People can't show up at work. People have these very, very serious mental health situations. And particularly, he talked about young people, 25 to 30, who feel that they're not going to make it in this professional world of today, women who are transitioning from lower positions to higher level positions, that they can't find the balance of their
Mhm.
personal life and
Mhm.
being in these leadership
Mhm.
positions. But the most not talked about segment is men, men in leadership positions. They are not allowed
Right,
to be in burnout.
right,
How,
right.
how do you see these three aspects of burnout and anxiety?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. And the for the young, what it feels like is they see so much struggle, and they observe, the generation above them that uh, is not happy, and they're like, I don't want to become that, I don't
Hmm.
want to become that. So it's like they feel like they don't have any hope. And
Right.
to me, that's a feed of burnout and stress and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And so for that, the idea is, instead of looking for the external um, invitation to make a difference, figure out what it is you want to do, and start down that path. But really, in our world, is with Psych-K, is find that inner peace within yourself, rather than
Hmm.
expecting it to be outside of ourselves.
Hmm.
With women in the balance, there's always been that concept of balancing work and home and stuff. And nowadays, people, more and more people are coming out and like, there's really no balance. You can't balance it. You're either putting your energy in one place or the other place.
Hmm.
So, it's more like a seesaw rather than a balance beam,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
Um, and so there's times when you might have to stay late and finish something. And you've got to have a community around you that can support you with, your family
Right.
needs or whatever. And then there's times when you have to have an agreement where you can say no to a work commitment because your child is in a play and you need to go to the play,
Hmm.
whatever. I mean, it's again back to finding that place within yourself that can say, this is my value structure, and here's how I'm going to make a decision, and being very open about it. Cultures in organizations, yes, they're shifting, not as fast as they should, but
Yeah,
they're
but
shifting,
way more than before,
and
yes.
way more than before. And part of it is whoever we is, needs to just stand and go, this is what I stand for. And I'm making decisions from this point. I will give
Hmm.
you 100% when I have 100% to give. But when I need to be over here, then I'm going to be over here, whatever. But being open and honest about, here's my expectations of you. I don't want you burning out either. And here's
Hmm.
my expectations for myself. The same, with that goes with men. The old script is men are strong and tough and they can take everything. And that's a very, these terms are thrown around, but it's a very masculine way of running as a manager or leader or business. And more people are understanding that both men and women, in whatever form that is, has
Right.
both masculine and feminine. And the feminine side of leadership is growing because we need that empathy, we need that understanding, we need that creativity, we need innovation. And sometimes that comes from exploring things from a softer standpoint than the typical masculine pressure.
Right. Yeah. I feel, if I go back to the 24 years that I was doing marketing research and the relationships that I established within the organization, what we are sharing and how we went through that, because that was normal.
Mm-hmm.
We lived in that normalized burnout world. We
Mm-hmm.
lived in that normalized out of balance world where either you had one thing or the other. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I can seesaw, but in that moment in my life, the belief and the cultural expectation was you're either going to do this very well or this very well, but you can't do
Can't
both
do both.
well,
Right.
right?
Right.
And we bought into that,
Mm-hmm.
and I lived like that for so many years. I would go to work. I would be the first one to arrive because I was the director of the company. So I had to show everybody. And in Colombia, we start at 8 a.m. So
Mm-hmm.
I had to be there before 8.
Mm-hmm.
And by then, I would have put my kids already in the school bus and, take care of whatever we needed to take care of at home. And then come back after everybody left the office with things under my arm to take care of once the kids were in bed.
Mm-hmm.
So this idea of quality time with kids, which is bullshit,
Well, it's
because it's
critical,
not
but it
true.
doesn't, it can't
But
have,
yeah,
yeah. You
but
got to
it's
plan for it. Yeah.
right. But it was a game in my
Mm-hmm.
head, right? The
Mm-hmm.
quality time. I would have done this having the resources, the inner resource that I have now, in a completely different way. And I don't feel guilty about it. I know that that's how it needed to be. But I'm just saying how normalized that is in the
Yeah.
organizational world. And then I would be working until midnight or 1 in the morning, and then the next day repeat. And I became addicted
Right.
to that
Right.
because I was getting so much recognition from outside, so much validation
Mm-hmm.
from my organizational culture. My mom was my boss for 24 years. My sister worked with me, and we had a very good base of clients, and people see you doing these things, and your co-workers see you doing these things, and you set the bar
Mm-hmm.
for that to be how everybody should be doing
Mm-hmm.
things
Mm-hmm.
because you're doing them. And
Right.
it's
Right.
exhausting.
It is exhausting. In many ways, it's exhausting. Absolutely. And, again, that feeds the whole burnout concept.
Mhm.
I was similar to you when I worked in corporate, in that I would get there first, but it really wasn't. I may be joking with myself, but I don't think it was because I needed to be seen. It was just I hated traffic and it was easier to go in early to avoid the traffic. But it set a precedence for people. They thought, oh,
Mhm.
I was a good worker and I wasn't a manager at that point, got a lot done. But they're like, oh, if Robin's here, we better get here.
Mhm.
Had nothing to do with that. People were perceiving it that way, but
Right.
it was me wanting to avoid the traffic. And then I would wait to leave till later because I wanted to go to the fitness center afterwards and I didn't want the traffic and the crowd at the fitness center. So the other thing is we make up perceptions about things, right?
Absolutely.
So is it really that everybody needs to stay that long, or is it we just need to talk about it? I
Mhm.
think there's a lot of assumptions that are made, and and we can call it cultural belief systems that have been put in
Right.
place, that if somebody would just call it out and go, and why are we doing this?
Exactly.
If we can get our work done in 6 hours, why do we have to be here 10 hours? You know,
Correct.
but, and then and so yes, it takes courage to bring that up. And maybe it's not in a group that you bring it up. Maybe it's one on one with various people or,
Mhm.
things like that. But when it has happened, there's, situations where people have done that and everybody's like, I don't know, why are we doing it this way? Well, because Robin keeps coming in early. Why do you come in early? Because I'm avoiding traffic.
Right, right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one of the things maybe with burnout is we tend to take it in and not want to admit it and, not tell anybody we're
Mhm.
feeling stress around this. And if everybody would just share, maybe that would bring some higher energy in and, ask some questions. What's the
Sure.
benefit of us being here, for 10 hours?
Mhm.
What would be
Mhm.
the benefit of going home at after 7 6 7 hours and
Right,
having some downtime and not taking, new rule, no one's allowed to use their phone or computer and for work on the weekends? Wouldn't
right.
that be something? I mean, that those kinds of things are happening in some companies.
That's awesome. I think it's, back to we don't have the conversation because this is what it's always been done that way and it's expected to keep happening. And if somebody says anything, they're going to be looked at weird or
Right.
judged or rejected or, whatnot. But I do agree with you that there's a shift. And what we want to propose today is how do we make that shift faster, easier, simpler for those who say, so what do I do about it? If
Hmm.
if it's tough to change the cultural environment, our proposal is, well, let's not look out there. Let's
Mm-mm.
look in here.
Right.
And that's what we want to share
Right.
today. So in your experience, if you would be talking with somebody who feels just exhausted because some people don't even know that they're in burnout. It's almost like you have to be sick in the hospital to be
Right.
diagnosed as
Right,
such.
right, right. Well,
Hmm.
I'll just share. I was in burnout before the pandemic, but didn't know it.
Hmm.
I was
Hmm.
traveling 2 or 3 weekends or in a month
Hmm.
to teach or to go to events or whatever. And it was just, I was on the cycle and didn't even realize it. And then the pandemic hit and I got to stay home and I was like, wow, I like it here. I'm going to change the way that yes, I'm an
Hmm.
entrepreneur, so I have control over this, but I'm going to change the way that I run my business now.
Sure.
But I had to be forced to stop to recognize it. So yeah,
Yeah.
and burnout, anxiety, stress certainly does not help our health. So the
Hmm.
last thing we want anybody to do is to have a health crisis that wakes them up. So let's listen to, this and explore it for yourselves so that you don't have to go down that path of waking up in the hospital with a heart attack or whatever and going, how did I get here? Most people change who they are, change how they
Hmm.
behave
Hmm.
after that. And what we want to invite people to do is take action now and
Right.
look at what can you change, and like you said, it's not, let me change the culture or let me change the world. It's the world that, no, well, only thing that we have responsibility for is ourselves and shifting ourselves. And as I could tell many stories about people who had major issue with a boss or a client or a coworker, and in working in either private session or in the workshops with Psych-K, they originally wanted to change the boss, right? I want to go change, can you change the boss? Well, no, we can't. What we do is work with your perception of the boss or the peer or the coworker. And one particular example, this lady, her boss never said hello to her. I mean, she was just an animosity kind of feel. And we did her own personal work around her self-confidence, her leadership confidence, her ability to stay calm rather than being triggered,
Hmm.
that kind of thing. And within about a week, the boss was actually, quote, nicer to her. And
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
because if we're holding an animosity, there's an energy that's going out. The other person is like a receiver receiving it. It triggers them, and it's this loop that happens.
Right.
One of you's got to stop it, right? And
Mhm.
so we always say, let's take the responsibility and go, what is this about for me? What do I need to shift? And then as I shift or integrate a new perception around it, the potential is there that the whole loop
Exactly.
shifts.
So if we were to explain that process with this example that you gave of this woman saying, okay, I can't, I want my boss to change, and then you figure out, well, it doesn't happen that way. In Psych-K, we want to do it the other way around. How is that different from, okay, so I'm just going to be more confident, or I'm just going to know that I am worthy of having a better experience? Just choosing positive mind, or doing affirmations, or visualizing that now all of a sudden I have this magnificent, magical life that I deserve, and I'm going to manifest that. What's the difference? How would you explain to somebody like a 5-year-old, how is this different from the other things that you and I both did a lot of stuff before coming into Psych-K, trying to achieve that?
Right. Well, and I think there's part of the answer is we've all done all the other things. So
Mhm.
if they worked, they would have worked. So
Right.
they don't. They work maybe part of the time, but not consistently and not sustainably.
Mhm.
And so where Psyche steps in differently, and probably the simplest, for a 5-year-old, is they all have recording instruments now,
Mhm.
whether it's a little phone. Even my 5-year-old grandson has this little thing that he plays, and he puts a program in it and it plays a certain song, a little chip or something. I don't know what it is.
Okay.
But at some point, we got that little chip put in us, and we're just running a program.
Mhm.
So what Psych-K does is it gives you the opportunity to take that chip out and put a new one in so you can play a different song.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Okay. So, and it's almost that simple. That's one of the catches of Psych-K is we are so, and I was so habituated to everything has to be hard work. You've got to suffer. You got to work hard to get
Mhm.
something to change. And with Psych-K, sometimes it's a little bit longer than this, but what our change processes are called balances. And within a specific balance, it might be a 10-minute
Mhm.
process, 15-minute process. Now, you might need multiples of those depending on what the situation is. But, for a particular stressor, it could just be a 10 or 15-minute transformation that occurs. You took out the old script, you put in a new chip, and you have a new way of activating what behaviors are going to happen.
Mhm. And what if we were to explain the difference again of when in those 10-15 minutes we access the subconscious mind, which is different from doing just conscious mind work. What happens when we access the subconscious mind? Why is this simple and easy?
Great question. So I was the big question asker when I took the basic workshop many years ago.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah, and one of the things that Rob often said is, do we have to know why in
Mm-hmm.
order to have a result? Which we don't. I don't know why a lot of things work, but I use them, like this phone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how all this works, but I use it. So I learned years ago just to let go of how does this work and why does this work and blah blah blah. When I got results, I was like, okay, it works. I'm on it. And we could, use the concept that the subconscious, when we do a balance, we're actually aligning 3 levels of consciousness. So we work with what we call 3 levels of consciousness. One is, or aspects. One is conscious, our conversation, our awareness of what's happening. The second aspect would be subconscious, which is like the hard drive in our computer. So it's the storage unit and it's the operating system for
Mm-hmm.
everything that we do. And then the third aspect of consciousness you could call superconscious or higher self, spirit, whatever version of that resonates for you. And one of the things that happens is if we have a goal, a conscious desire to act differently or to behave differently, or I'm not going to get triggered this time, whatever. We can say that all day long, but if the subconscious, which is 95% of our capacity to behave, to think, if that has the program of, I used to get triggered. I'll just side note. I used to get triggered by people who were very aggressive talkers, like
Mm-hmm.
really,
Mm-hmm.
aggressive, male or female, it didn't matter, but aggressive. And that used to trigger me. And did my balancing, and now I can hold my space with
Right.
them. So
Mm-hmm.
the idea is, you may not know why. I never knew why that happened, but I was able to rewrite that because I did this process called a balance. But the subconscious will just respond or react to things, whether we're conscious of that reaction or not. We're often conscious of the reaction afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I did it again. So we've got the conscious desire, the subconscious that holds all the programs or the activation. And then the third aspect is superconscious, which is the highest aspect of yourself that says, you know what, this is the path that would be great for you to go down or not. And so in Psych-K, we verify, is this a good thing to do or not before we ever step on that path?
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I reference in this is Psych-K works like a three-legged stool. So there's mind, body, and spirit. And a lot of programs have mind, or they have body, or they have spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Some have mind and body, some have body and spirit, some have mind and spirit. But I haven't found a consistent process that has all three.
Okay.
And I think that's one of the unique things about Psych-K is that we honor both mind, body, and spirit in a holistic way to create this congruency all through our systems so that we don't have to overthink anything. We're like, I'm not going to do that again. Well, if you don't have the program that activates, you won't. So
Mm-hmm.
change the activation and have a different experience.
Awesome. And can you include in that explanation what happens with the whole brain state? How's that the completion of all that and the whole brain state that happens in a psychic bounce?
Yeah, thank you. So we use that term whole brain state, and the idea is, and it's known that we have a left hemisphere and a right hemisphere, and they process things differently. There's a lot of controversy here, but we also keep it super simple. There is a difference, and they work very well hand in hand. When we talk about whole brain state, I also want to just bring in that we're not just talking about the brain,
Right.
we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about every aspect that has neurons, which your heart has neurons, your gut has neurons, probably every part
Mm-hmm.
of your big toe probably has neurons. They just haven't discovered it yet. But when we use what we call a whole brain state or create what's called a whole brain state, what that does is it brings the left right hemisphere, those processing capacities, and every other aspect that has neuron influence into alignment so that instead of it fighting each other, it's actually combining or coming into congruency, into alignment. And when that alignment happens, then the subconscious gets rewritten.
Okay.
And so then we secure it or move forward, and you don't have to rethink. You have to take an
Mm-hmm.
action. We can talk about that, but you don't have to rethink, oh, next time I'm not going to do that, because you don't have the program to activate it anymore. So
Right.
this whole brain state is a way of congruency or alignment that allows you to move in a calm, centered, peaceful, um, coherent way.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So as you were talking, I was reflecting also on my own story, when I started to do Psych-K in 2009, and I was the director of our marketing research company for my family. I didn't like what I was doing. So I would be all the time, I'd be saying to myself and to the people around me, I need to quit this. I don't enjoy it. I'm not doing what I love, but I didn't leave. And when I started to do Psych-K, and I'm mentioning this because you talked about some things need more than just one bounce. And this is where the journey of expanding our consciousness comes into. So one of the first things, like you said, is we want to change what's happening outside. And when I did Psych-K, I realized it's not about what's going on outside. It's not about I don't like the clients, or I don't like the work, or I don't like my relationship with my boss. slash mom or whatever. And I realized the first thing I realized is I needed to be in peace. If I was going to choose to stay in that
Mm-hmm.
job for whatever time I was going to be there, to be in peace. And
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the first things that I did, the transformation of stress that we do in Psych-K that's so simple. And to be whole brained with, I'm going to come into this job every day and I'm going to actually be part of this in a proactive, peaceful way instead of
Mm-hmm.
pushing back all day inside of me. So that's where that journey started, in being aware of that and choosing, what do I
Mm-hmm.
want instead?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to come in and be part of this in a constructive way. And that led to more constructive relationships with my
Mm-hmm.
coworkers, because instead of keep telling them all the time, oh, you guys don't, you're not good enough,
Mm-hmm.
you do things, you're in a mediocre way and you're not, I have to do everything for you, and realizing that that was not them. Again, taking responsibility of where's that inside of me,
Right.
where am I not good enough, why do I need these people to not be good enough,
Right.
and then realizing that I needed small people in my life because it was part of my lack of self-worth. Another level of awareness, expanding my consciousness, more balances around that. And then in another level, realizing, well, I'm not leaving because for me it's very threatening to not know if I leave this where I, successful company, clients all the time, which means money
Mm-hmm.
every 2 weeks in the bank. Where's that money going to come from if it's not from
Mm-hmm.
here, if this is what I've done for 24 years? Huge stress.
Mm-hmm.
And my subconscious mind was saying, no, you're not going anywhere, even
Yeah,
if you want
exactly.
to.
Right.
Is what we call a secondary gain. And being able to, again, be aware of this, expand my consciousness again, and tell my subconscious mind, you know what, it's going to be okay. I can't be safe and have enough resources doing what I love, which is not this. And that, one balance
Right.
after another, 2 years later, I was able to, from that very whole brain state and new subconscious foundation, say, I'm ready to leave 24 years of this work and go do what I love.
Mm-hmm.
And here we are 15 years later, uh,
Still loving your work, right?
loving what I do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and in a way that I never dreamt of, because it was impossible to have this dream, that
Right.
living in such normalized culture of, this is what you wake up, you stress, you're addicted to that stress, you repeat the next day. I could not have
Life, life,
seen
yeah. Life was
right.
very small. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's when I started to understand what Rob Williams used to say. It's not that you can't imagine, it's that you can't imagine.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And we were just talking about the whole brain state is once you get into that, that expands your ability to see options that you didn't even realize was there.
Mhm.
So I had a client years ago who hated her job and she was going to quit and she was putting resumes out and stuff. And as we worked, but she couldn't leave for obvious reasons until she got another job. And so what we did is I can't remember, but it was some statement similar to I see opportunities wherever they are, or something
Mhm.
like that,
Mhm.
because she just was not seeing any possibility of anything. And what's interesting is shortly after that, the company she liked the company she worked with, she just was bored and didn't like what she was doing. They came to her and gave her a promotion and a raise to
Wow.
do something else because they realized that she had more potential.
Mhm.
That completely shifted everything. Is if you can't see the opportunities, they can be flying by, but you're not seeing them because you have a limitation, a filter.
Right.
We call them beliefs, but you have a
Mhm.
filter that's there. And what's interesting is she worked at that great job in the same company for a couple years, and then she has moved on. So, but she moved on in a healthy way,
Mhm.
in a choice way. Yeah. So
Yeah.
it does come down to choice. How are we making choice? Are we making choice because it's what we think we have to do,
Hmm.
or and that's again back to what we talked about earlier. It's an energy drainer, right? If you,
Right.
I've got to do this, I must do this, I should do this, they make me do this. That nobody wants to live in that arena. But even if you're in that, you can shift your perception about it and go, I'm going to choose to be happy in this situation. I'm going to choose to bring peace into
Hmm.
this.
Hmm.
There can be, it's like a, hurricane, the eye of the hurricane. It's crazy out here, but it's completely silent in the center. So
Hmm.
be the eye of the hurricane,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
not the hurricane, but be the eye of the hurricane.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's something in there also, sometimes we're stuck in, I want this to happen this way, I want it this way, I want it this way. And we go at it with all that we have because there's also all this culture that, well, if you want it,
Yeah.
uh, it's strong enough, it's going to happen. And I think here is another one of those huge lessons in both our journeys. Sometimes what we want is not what we need.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that when we do these psyche balances, because there's this guidance, you talked about these three aspects of ourselves. Our conscious mind wants something, and then we're going to give the subconscious mind these new programs, and we have this inner guidance that's so beautiful. And I had this experience with a woman in a workshop. She had this business and her partner and all these situations that were in her life. Some were good and some were not going as she wanted. So she bounced around those things. And when she gets home, the business was practically going out of business. It was not possible to do that anymore. And the husband left, and so her life is completely upside down within a couple of weeks. She's like, "What happened?"
Yeah, right.
You know?
And blaming, right?
Yeah.
What?
And then she gave herself the opportunity to use Psyche, even in the midst of all that, and be calm in the midst of the circumstances, which is something that Rob used to say. It's not, not life not happening to you. Is when life happens, you have this practical tool to see
Right,
solutions that you couldn't see before.
right.
Because, like Albert Einstein used to say, you can't solve a situation from the
Mhm.
place that it was created. So she starts to do her balances and discovers that they weren't happy in that relationship, and they needed to be apart,
Mhm.
and that was a great gift.
Mhm.
And that because now they were apart, now she could see new opportunities that she couldn't see before for
Right,
herself,
right,
for what it was that she really loved to do.
right.
And she started to see, to receive proposals of things that she would have never even considered if she was busy with that work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So wouldn't it one of the things that's always lovely and kind of curious to me is we can be aware once you're aware of, okay, this is just a moment in time and it's chaos, but there's going to be something good on the other side.
Hmm.
It's easy to sit when nothing's happening to say that, but when you're in the chaos, to remember this is just a moment in time and it's going to get better. It's that story, it's a Zen story or whatever, of the guy, that the farmer who the horse dies,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
all the things happen, and all he says is, oh, it's so bad. And
Let's
people
see.
tell him, and he's like, well, it could be good, it could be
Yeah.
bad, let's
Let's see.
see. And that's sort of, where I've gotten is, okay, there's something just happened. I wonder what's going to happen
Hmm.
about this.
Hmm.
And again, back to what we talked about earlier, is knowing Psyche, I can stop and transform the stress around it, or the anxiety or the fear that I have, the projection, the gut level terror that might be going on, um, and just observe after that,
Right.
and
Right.
stay separate from. So sometimes the chaos, we feel, is because we're emotionally hooked into it. And if we can just decouple, which is what transforms the perception of stress in Psych-K does, is it decouples us. The situation is here, but emotionally, we don't have to be hooked into that. And then you can go, oh, there is good here, or it's not as bad, Or I have a choice rather than feeling like I don't have a choice. I have a choice. I can take this small step of an action rather than feeling like a victim.
Yeah.
And
And
I think that probably feeds the burnout concept also.
exactly.
Right.
That's where
Yeah.
we come
Yeah.
back to that,
Yeah.
you know, if it's why is this happening to
Mhm.
me? And you can shift that question, you know, what is this for in my life?
Right.
How is this helping me get to a better place inside of
Right.
me? How do I use
Or
this in my favor? And
what
then,
could be a benefit of this?
right.
And what,
And
yeah.
then you couple that with a practical tool that is what we're inviting you to be curious about, that is PSYCH-K, so that you can actually move forward within
Right.
and then take the actions outside, which is what you said earlier. We need to talk about the action steps because it's not only whatever happens at the level of the mind.
Correct. Yeah. It's, it's one thing to shift that internal belief system, that internal program, however you want to term it. But what we always do at the end of a private session, and whether that's with yourself or with a client, is to ask, what's an action step that I can now take? An action step is an external involvement with the reality world out here. So, it would be, for example, if like the example I said earlier, somebody balanced around hating their job, like you did, and then what's an action step now that they are like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm at a more peaceful, calm thought about this. What's an action step I can take? Well, you know what? I'm going to take I'm going to bake cookies and take them in and
Mm-hmm.
say happy day to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
That would be an action step that they could take that they would not have done the day before. You know, showing
Mm-hmm.
that they're happy, but not just saying I'm happy today, but actually doing something for someone or
Yeah.
for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. Or shifting how you talk to people in your company. That was one of my first action steps, is instead of blaming in meetings that we have every
Mhm.
week, is okay, so this happened. Yeah, it happened. What can we do different the next time?
Mhm.
Or what's a solution that you can
Right.
propose, instead of me trying to fix everything?
Right.
And that
Yeah.
just completely started to empower people around me, and it was magic. But
Right.
it was just not, I'm going to try and do that. That was the result of having done my inner work
Well,
before that.
and again, that's that congruency.
Hmm.
Because if we just do it from a conscious, okay, I'm going to do this energetically,
Hmm.
we still have the
Right.
energy that's sitting there. And that's what people pick up. They
Hmm.
pick up the incongruency. Oh, yeah, you're saying these nice words, but you
Hmm.
don't really believe them.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
by bringing it together, we can then be aligned with our behavior, our words, our intentions. Everything starts to come together, and it feels better both for you personally as well as whoever's receiving.
Yep. Well, we're coming to the end of our time today. Is there anything that you would love to invite people to do after this conversation
Well,
today?
I yeah, so two things. One would just, stay open and curious. Start to notice where your energy is energized, where things are feeling lively and energized, and where it starts to drain you. Get that awareness. And then on the simplest level, just make a new choice. Secondarily, I would say explore PSYCH-K if you don't already know it. If you do know PSYCH-K, take some of the ideas that we shared tonight and create your own goal statements and do your own balances or transform stress around something that came up in the thought pattern as we were talking. But those that don't know PSYCH-K, we just invite you to explore it.
Hmm.
Um, you can go to the main website, psych-k.com. I'm sure you'll post that up there.
Hmm.
And look at PSYCH-K. Go to YouTube. We have a YouTube channel that is filled with informational
Right.
videos, interviews, etc. One of the things that people often have asked me is, don't you get bored? You've been doing this for over 30 years. Aren't you bored? And I'm like, no, I'm not, because every experience is different. And it's like a gift at Christmas morning. You never know
Mhm.
what's this going to give me as I move forward. So
Yeah.
I would just say be open and curious.
Yeah. Great. Love it. Love curiosity, and has been one of my greatest partners since I started to do Psyche. Thank you, Robin, for your time today. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We'll be posting our website on the feed later on, and if we can serve you in any way, we will be happy to do so. We teach Psyche now in more than 60 countries, in more than 20 languages. We've been doing this for almost 36 years
I
now.
think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah.
more than 150,000 people have integrated this in their life. And if this is your moment, then maybe this is why you were here today.
That's right.
Thank you, dear.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Blessings to all.
Bye, everybody.